Je me terre. De position.
Hello, lovelies. Over the years, I have bored you to tears many times with the story of my introduction to role-playing games, which came not via Dungeons and Dragons, but via Fighting Fantasy. Now, this was through the single-player game books, but very early on, I would play them with a friend, where I would read the book and they would play the character. I would roll for the monsters, they would roll for them, and that's how we would go through with them making the choices. So kind of like a standard role-playing game, but not before we ever knew what a real role-playing game even was. So that's how I got into role-playing, and then through the introductory role-playing game for Fighting Fantasy, this one with the Tiger Man on the front, which was a paperback like all the others, but the game inside wasn't like all the others. Sure, there was a sample dungeon, but it didn't have the choices made explicitly there for you. You had to go through and play it to do it. And so from there, and I think from suggestions in the back on other RPGs, something that you wouldn't see in a modern game, went onto a model shop in Basingstoke and bought my first proper RPG after that, which was MERP. So that's my start. I have a lot of affection for Fighting Fantasy and the way in which it built up both the single player playing through the books and the British role-playing industry, and public awareness of it by leveraging the huge lead that they had in single player games and using it at least somewhat to nudge people towards what we consider to be role-playing today. So if it wasn't for Fighting Fantasy, and if it wasn't specifically for Fighting Fantasy, the introductory role-playing game, I don't think we'd have seen the unique character of British RPGs come to the fore, and I don't think we'd have seen the rapidity of success of role-playing games in the UK that we otherwise had. So yeah, this is a very important and totemic and extremely worn and yellowed book for me. So I thought it was about time I got hold of a copy of Advanced Fighting Fantasy, which has been put together and re-released by Arian Games through Cubicle 7 Entertainment under the Fighting Fantasy brand. So this still calls itself the introductory role-playing game, but this is much more advanced and much more complex than Tiger Man ever was. Not that that's saying that much, because it's still extremely simple. You know, this is my red box. This is my entry into the world of role-playing games. I had some problems with my bank card recently, so I decided to buy this copy just to purely test that the card was actually working. So that's how I ended up with it. It's a hardcover. It's about 175 pages. Fighting Fantasy is just hugely influential. The world of Titan, the monsters from Out of the Pit. You know, this is as important in its own way as the original monster manuals and Red Box D&D ever were. This is something a bit more complex and a bit better than the very basic game. And as I say, this really helped define what made British RPGs British RPGs. Gritty, dark, humorous, often scatological. That's just, that's the nature of British role-playing. So I think Titan and Fighting Fantasy must have been pretty influential, along with other British cultural touchstones, on Warhammer, and then from there onwards to all of British role-playing. Characters in this game are very simply defined. You have skill, stamina, luck, magic, if you have any magic ability whatsoever, and magic points. Stamina is basically your health. Skill is how good you are at everything, so it's a literal god stat. And luck gets you out of jams, but can also be tapped into during the game for other things, and it slowly reduces, so eventually you run out of luck. System wise, mostly you're either trying to roll under your stat or rolling 2 dice and adding your stat to overcome the opposition's roll. Said rolls are modified potentially, typically by -2 to +2 depending on difficulty, but it can go as high as + or -6. Like if you're trying to climb a vertical wall with no handholds in the rain, you might get a penalty of -6, or the games master might just say no, that's impossible, but so it goes. With so few stats, if you're randomly generating your character, then it's very possible, even likely, to have a bad stat. But to counter this, they suggest more of a points-based character creation system in the start, and random generation is optional. So yeah, I would definitely go with the points-based character creation, just to have everyone on something of an even keel, because if you roll high on your skill, you're a god character. If you roll low on your stamina, you're gonna die. There are race rules, which is something you didn't really get in the single player game books. Humans get +1 luck, which is nice. Elves get +1 magic. Dwarves get +2 stamina. You get special skills, but all skills are special skills, so they should have just called them skills. Skills just give you a flat bonus when you're rolling to perform certain actions, so if you're trying to roll under your skill, you would add it to your skill to determine what you needed to roll under. If you're rolling against someone or something, you would roll the 2d6 and you would add the skill level on top of your skill, and that would determine your total. So skills make a pretty big difference in your capacity to succeed, because the game uses 2d6, and so the probability spike is 6, 7, 8. You also get talents, which are extra special abilities. It's a classless system, so if you want to pursue a particular sort of class type, you can do that with your selection of talents. Humans get a little bit screwed when it comes to talents, because elves and dwarves get dark vision straight off the bat, like they always do, and also get another talent, and also it seems from the wording, and humans just get the one talent, so touch annoying there. Maybe you could even things out by giving humans an extra talent. So the main sort of changes and additions are, I suppose, character progression, so you can raise your stats as you go along, and variable damage and armor, where you use a sort of d6 matrix to determine how much damage you do or is absorbed. So a punch, for example, will do between 1 and 3 damage. 1 to 5 roll does 1 damage. 1 to 4 roll does 1 damage. 5 roll does 2 damage. 6 does 3 damage. While a sword will do between 2 and 5. 2 damage on a 1, 3 damage on a 2 to 4, 4 damage on a 5, and 6 on a 6, I think. So, 2 to 6 damage. Critical hits, that's when you roll double 6, do double damage, and reduce the struck person's skill by 1 until they can get their wound tended. Critical misses, double 1 fumble, and there's a chart to see what happens then. There's just over a 2.5% chance, roughly half your odds on a d20 game, of getting a crit or a fumble. But with rolling 2d6, most results are going to cluster around the 6 to 8 range, so it's a bit less swingy and a bit more gritty by nature than something like d20 systems are. Your standard issue leather jerkin, so rogue approved, is going to stop 0 to 1 damage most of the time, and shields add on to the amount of damage that you absorb from incoming attacks, depending on what you roll. What they suggest is you roll all of the dice that you might need all at once, using different colours, and use that to determine the results. Might be interesting to play through some of the solo game books using the more advanced rules. It'll take a little bit of work, but not too much. So it's a simple game, possibly too simple. You could expand out the stats a bit. The skill categories that they have would make decent stats. There's a few combat options, a couple of magic systems, but doing something cool in combat is still a little bit tricky and not really covered in the game, save by GM Fiat. So, you know, there's nothing about aim strikes or trip attacks or guidelines for doing such things. So you'd have to come up with that yourself. There is a magic system, or, well, 3 magic systems, really, maybe 4. You have cantrips, which are little tricks, wizardry, which is a formalized magical school system, and sorcery, which is more intuitive and ingredients based. Cantrips and wizardry both use your magic points and your magic stat. Sorcery drains your stamina and items that you might have with you. In sorcery as well, charmingly, all of its spells are 3 letters, 3-letter words, with the word usually having some sort of relation to what happens. So if you cast Gob, G-O-B, you'll summon a goblin, while casting Yob, Y-O-B, summons a giant. Shit's powerful, but the component limitations and the health drain make it a real choice whether to use it or not, and the wordplay is fun. Annoyingly though, the spell list is incomplete and not in alphabetical order. And some of the spelling bears little resemblance to the effect that the spell actually has. You also get priestly magic. Priests get to use their powers once a day, but they're automatic in their effect, so useful like that. The book also provides us with basic primers on religion and the world of Titan, the world of Titan itself, expanded monsters to go with the Out of the Pit book, equipment, GM guidance, monster creation rules, adventure ideas, dungeon generators using a scatter dice method, race creation. They could have just done all the race creation bits for us. It would have taken them a page, perhaps. But there is nice reference in the back. So, reading through it and thinking back to my times playing the single player books, I started thinking about using the rules to play Freeway Fighter or the Samurai one or the horror one. The rules are simple enough that kit bashing them is pretty easy, to be honest. So that's a strength that it has. You can port things over almost one for one. I mean, modern weapons, firearms and things would need a little bit of fiddling about with, but it's doable. Style wise, I mean, it's black and white, and they seem to have gone for the lower quality printing, which is fine, but it's not necessarily particularly reflected in the price. And there are things like typos and a page with the word advert written on it that doesn't contain an advert, and some other blank pages in the back, which is unfortunate. The font isn't particularly evocative. I mean, if I was them, I would have gone a point size higher, made the pages a bit more cramped, and gone for a style like the original paperbacks. I would have gone for that evocation effect. The artwork is also patchy, which is weird because you have so much great fighting fantasy art to draw upon, and there are people around today who do art in a similar style, I don't know if it's a rights issue, a cost issue, or what, but I would have preferred more art, because there's a lot of white space in the book. The character sheets are also a bit scrappy. The map that they give of the Wishing Well, which was a starting adventure in here, so nostalgia value. It looks like something, you know, I'd jot at the table, which is fine, I guess, but you want a bit more from a book like this. So style-wise, I can't score it particularly highly. I would only give it a style score of 2, because it is disappointing when you think of all the great fighting fantasy art from the books. It's just not present. In terms of substance, I mean, this is a complete game, but it is very, very basic, and I think it might be unsatisfying to a lot of gamers today, who are more used to the underlying ideas, whether from computer games or whatever else, than we were back in the early to mid 80s. So while it's complete, I don't feel like it's pushed it quite enough. Maybe they should do a super advanced fighting fantasy or something. I don't know. There are a few other retro clones and things out there that try to do similar stuff. We've reviewed some of them here on the channel. So overall then, that's only 6 out of 10 or 3 out of 5, so that's, you know, very average. Nostalgia just wasn't enough for me. It might be enough for you. Now, if we take Advanced Fighting Fantasy and Titan, the setting book, and Out of the Pit, the monster book, and we combine all three together, then the style doesn't really go up much, unless you have the old versions of those books, but the substance then becomes a 5. So if you're going to get it, I would get all 3 books. They do have some other material out. Don't know much about that, so I can't really help you there. So a little bit disappointing, but I'm glad I have it. And Fighting Fantasy is such a pivotal series of books and ideas in the hobby, particularly in the UK hobby, and in my, you know, personal journey into becoming a role player, that I didn't feel ripped off, but it might be unsatisfying. It might be disappointing to some people. I think they should spruce it up with more art and more attention paid to the layout and to evoking what was. Zang.
In his house in R'lyeh, great Cthulhu lies dreaming, and when he awakens, he shall have the morning wood of aeons. Call of Cthulhu is a deeply pornographic card game. Enjoy your tentacles.
Place your bets now!
What happened today? See, I don't like the, I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity.